So I think we are now live for week 2 of Joint School. And Beverly, are you? Can you hear me okay? I think you might be on mute as yet.
Yep.
There we go. All right. Fantastic. Wonderful.
You got me now?
I have got you now, and thank you so much for joining us. This is really exciting, and I think really an important conversation to add to the breadth of resources that we're hoping to put together here with the Joint School Live project, in which we're hoping to provide different bits of information, different tools, conversations, and resources to help a range of people who are in a bit of a tricky situation as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. And now, Beverly, you and I, we've known each other, thanks to your hip to a degree for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And really, you've been fantastic at raising awareness about the patient experience of having a hip replacement, but perhaps particularly so the experience of going through that journey as someone who's perhaps younger than what many people would associate something like a hip replacement from being, even though it is becoming increasingly common among young people. But you've really, you've worked with Orthopedic Research UK on this, and you've worked with Dove more recently, lads and things. So I think you're really doing a fantastic job of normalizing something that really isn't as rare as it might seem. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Super. Well, I don't know if is there anything you'd like to add before we kick off into
No, it's the only time I get called young nowadays, though. So yeah, I had my hip replacement when I was 42. So in March 2018. So it's now 2 years old.
Yeah. And and by all accounts, from what I hear, doing well, and you're back at work and everything. And
yeah, no, it's really good. Yeah, it's definitely a life changer, and really pleased I had it done. So
yeah, fantastic. Well, I think we might as well just dive right into the questions, really. And so these are some that we also do some work together with the forum, the Facebook group, where some people can come together and share tips and ideas around having a hip replacement. And so I've kind of gone through and had a look there on the kind of questions that people are asking. And so I think probably what we'll do as the aim of these videos is for them to be helpful both for people who are sort of waiting for their operation, and maybe waiting, may need to wait longer now than otherwise, had it not been for everything that's happened. But I'm also hopeful that it'll be useful for those who are on the road to recovery, so to speak, but may not have sort of as easy access to follow-up appointments and advice and checking in with physiotherapists, and just being able to even access other patients and so on to get their experience. So hopefully it'll be useful both for people who are before surgery and those who are sort of in various phases of recovery.
Yeah.
But so if we wind the clock back then somewhat to earlier in 2018, or perhaps even before, could you describe what kind of how your life was impacted by your hip before the operation?
So before my surgery, I was getting a lot of shooting pains in my inside my right groin, and to be honest, that in fact I actually thought that I'd got some sort of groin strain for a number of months and let it go on, and I went for physio and had massages, and I just kept telling everyone I've got a groin strain. And then I seemed to get like a pain in my thigh bone in my right leg, and it ran down towards my knee. And apparently these are really common traits of people with hip issues. And so I never actually thought for 1 minute, because I always imagined my hip was to be right up the top. And because I wasn't getting pains up there, I didn't think for 1 minute that I'd have any problems with my hips. So it wasn't until I went for an MRI scan, and I'd obviously been to the doctors, explained my different symptoms, the problems I was having. I found that actually I could walk around all day, and I was in a lot more pain in the evenings when I was at rest. So sort of come 9 o'clock, I'd sit down on the sofa, and I then didn't really want to get up to make a cup of tea or anything like that, because that was when it was the most painful, and also in bed. So I really didn't think that that would be my issue. So when I went to the doctor, I explained my symptoms. He obviously had a good inkling of what was wrong, sent me for the MRI scan, and then I remember the MRI guy going and saying to me, well, we're scanning your hip today. And I said, no, you're scanning my leg. I've got a problem with my leg. And he sort of nodded at me and carried on and completed the scan. And it wasn't until obviously I went back for the results, they then obviously told me that I'd got osteoarthritis in both hips, predominantly worse in my right. And originally I was told, go away, we'll see you in 10 years. You're too young, there's nothing we can do about it. And that was a bit of a shock. So I walked away and thought really that was the end of it. There was nothing I could do about it. I was going to have to just, put up with the pain, and it did come and go, and I did feel a little bit of a fraud, because I'd have really good weeks, but then I'd also have really, really bad weeks, and where I couldn't get my leg into the car. I had to lift, if in the work cars, they were quite low, the seats were quite low, and I used to have to physically lift my leg into the car. I wasn't able to run. So, those were really sort of they affected my day-to-day life, really.
Yeah. And of course those impacts then also have an impact on sort of your sense of self and your emotional well-being, and were you troubled with in terms of sleeping as well?
Mainly if I'd wake up, I'd get some shooting pains in my leg. As I said, it was more when I was awake for me, that my pains. I'm also a horse rider. So strangely enough, I could ride my horse with no issues at all, which people said, well, if there's something wrong with you, how can you ride your horse? So I'd ride my horse, but it wasn't until I got off, I was then a bit like John Wayne, and then and later on in the day, I really paid for it later. So it wasn't until, by just before my operation, I was limping permanently all the time. When I was walking, I had a permanent limp.
And then, so can you tell us a bit more about, what once the decision was made and you were booked in for surgery, what was the kind of preparatory phase like for you?
So for me, as you said, it was something that I thought, I didn't know anybody that was, younger that had this sort of thing. As I knew a lot of older people, I knew grandparents that had it done. I felt quite isolated. It was a very, very isolating feeling like you're different and there's something wrong. And for me, it was the quality of life. And as I said, the doctor said to me, go away, we'll see you in 10 years. And I left it. I did leave it quite a long time before I went back to them. And then I happened to see somebody else, a different consultant. And she said to me, she'd worked with people that had been in the army and worked in services and things. And she said to me, well, how do you do your fitness test at work? How do you do this? I went, well, I don't. I take a lot of painkillers. And she actually really understood me. And I felt for the first time somebody was listening to me and believing what was wrong and the pain I was in. And she actually said to me, well, you can't go on like this. I'm going to leave it with me, and I'm going to refer you to somebody else, which is when she referred me to the surgeon. But for me, the decider was, I had young kids, and I couldn't even run over I couldn't play with them. I couldn't get up and down off the floor with them. And then for me, the decider was my son fell off his pony. No, he didn't have a really bad fall, but at the time he was at the other end of a sand school, and I just wanted to run over and pick him up and put him in my arms. And I couldn't run. And that for me was the big, distinct decider for me to say that this isn't how I should be at that age. I should be having fun. I should be having the, element of my life, it should be normal. Yeah. So yeah, that for me, that was the big decider, and it was affecting me. It was getting me down. I didn't like people saying, "Oh, why are you limping all the time? And what's wrong with you? And oh, well, you're all right today, but you're not all right. You're all right today. You were limping yesterday." So yeah, it does have an effect, I think, on your own well-being.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely, I can definitely sympathise with people. when they have good days and bad days as well.
And what would your, like, knowing what you know now, sort of, a few years down the line, what would your message be to your, to your previous self before surgery, or indeed to people who are in that kind of situation now, perhaps?
I think you've got to stay strong. You've got to be positive. I know that obviously we're in England, we're a lot different. There's people out there that are probably watching this or listening to this that are in different countries. So in England, we're guided by the NHS, unless obviously you've got private medical insurance. I was with the NHS and had a fantastic service from them. And so, you are guided by doctors. And when I went and saw the surgeon, I was recommended that I tried to have a steroid injection. Mm-hmm. And these, I'd never say don't try it to anyone. However, it didn't work for me. And actually, it isn't uncommon. They said to me it could last a week, it could last 3 months. But for me, it personally brought the pain on a lot quicker, a lot stronger. Oh, okay. And also that's when I became permanently limping after I had the steroid injection. So for me, I wouldn't have another one if it came up to when I come around to having my other side done. Yeah. Because I think it's not, so it doesn't solve the problem, it is just delaying it. And I think the difference was I was trying to delay it because I was scared that I was young. Yeah. Whereas actually, inevitably, I was going to have it done. So for me, it was the right decision. And next time, I would just have it done without a doubt. Yeah. And you're always going to be scared because they're changing something. They're changing a big part of your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and once you've had, you can't go back. So it's difficult to make that decision. But I would recommend it for me, but everybody's different. We've all got different. I was very lucky. I had straightforward osteoarthritis. There are obviously people with other underlying conditions that they might have grown up with or that might have changed their hips. So I would like to say, don't always compare yourself to somebody else. Yeah. We're all different and we've all got different rates of recovery as well. But a lot of it is staying positive and in your mental well-being. Mm-hmm. That plays a massive part in your healing before and after and how you are. But if you make your decision and you need to be firm with the people you're speaking to and have an idea of direction of where you want to go and what you want to achieve out of it at the end of the day. Yeah,
I think that's very wise and right. Are there any strategies or techniques that you found particularly helpful in terms of trying to keep positive?
I won't lie. I was so nervous before it, and I worked myself up into a complete frenzy about it. And I think, as I said, that was because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't have anyone to talk to. I felt very isolated because I felt younger and it wasn't the norm. For me, I think being relatively fit in the first place, and that doesn't mean by no means am I a runner or an athlete, or I don't class myself in those. Just keep yourself walking as much as you can, because and it's very hard. It's very easy to say, don't be overweight or try and keep healthy, because you sit up, you're less active because it hurts. But if you can eat healthily and try and keep your weight down a little bit, because I did put weight on because you're not as active, you're not doing as much. But those little things will help you in your recovery. And obviously with regards to the surgery. And
I think, and as you mentioned there as well, with everyone being different, and everyone is a kind of there'll be variations and a need for everyone to find their own approach. And while it's unfortunate to hear that the steroid injection in your case didn't have a good outcome, it's worth flagging that there are some cases where it will be an appropriate thing, and that's for each individual to then have that discussion with their surgeon or other doctors. So in some cases it may well be a good thing, and there's some use cases for it, but it's unfortunate that it didn't help in this case. But
definitely. You know, I've since spoken to other people, and they've had a great success, and they've had a couple of them before they've then had to have. So it's delayed. They've had a couple of them, which has been great for them, and that's definitely worked.
Yeah.
But you know, as well as we're talking about what things I did beforehand. I'm going to promote your fantastic app of My Recovery app, because it was really, really good. So I got your My Recovery app, as you know, before I did before I had my operation, and I actually did videoed myself. So I know you've improved it since I did it.
Yeah.
So I videoed myself doing some exercises beforehand when I could, and put them on the app. And you know, because you need to start doing these exercises beforehand. You need to start. They're not massive, but working on your muscles, your glutes, doing those sounds great, those bum clenches. They're all really good for you. They're really good. You can just sit there and do them while you're watching the telly and things like that. So having that strength beforehand and keeping those muscles working beforehand will improve and will help you with your recovery, I think, and definitely did for me. And with regards to your the Facebook group we're talking about, having a hip buddy. Now, this might sound crazy, but I think everyone should have a hip buddy.
Yeah.
I had one, and I was so lucky. I met up with a guy. He lives in the village with me, and I'd heard that he'd had a hip replacement about 6 weeks before me. And I chatted to him, and in fact, we've become fantastic friends now. He's a really great guy. But he let me know, he supported me, all the little worries that I had. I messaged him and said, is this normal? Can I use this? Could you do this? You know, and he gave me loads of great bits of advice, and we actually kept each other motivated. And then in turn, I then connected with a really lovely lady in America, and she's a bit older than me. And we were messaging each other privately for a long time. She was then 6 weeks behind me. And she said it was a godsend having me the same way that I'd had this other guy to message, because you're sitting there, you are at home quite a lot. So you've got somebody that you can share that experience with, because however lovely your family and friends are, they won't truly understand what you're going through and how it feels, and as supportive as they try to be, and they are. It's great to have somebody else that you can chat to and say, is this happening? How do you feel? So have a hip buddy, everyone.
Well, I think that's a very, very good point, and hopefully, and thank you also for the kind words about the My Recovery app. I mean, that's exactly what we've all been working for. It's not just it's not just me behind the app. There's a whole group of people who are working to help support people in getting ready for surgery and tracking their recovery. And indeed, I'm really hopeful that the Joint School app and what we're doing with Joint School Live will help to support people similarly in the way that we were able to support you, and also to provide the sense of community, and perhaps to link in people with others who may be in a similar situation, or may perhaps be a little bit further down the line. Or indeed, I'm hopeful that this conversation with yourself will help some people who may be earlier on in their journey than you are, to kind of gain an expectation and answer some of those questions, and help to feel less isolated.
I mean, the big thing about the app as well is it does support you. It's what I mean. I told you all about the graph. I mean, it has this amazing graph. So if you don't you have the day to do your exercises. I try to do it twice a day. Do it once a day, but if you can do it twice, that's even better. And it takes about half an hour. I just sat on the lounge floor while I was watching telly in the evening, and would do the exercises. And they're not difficult. You don't, as I said, you don't have to. Please, I don't want people to think, you've got to be really sporty, you've got to be really active. You haven't. They're such simple little muscle exercises which will make that big difference to your recovery. And the graph tells you if you haven't done them and you feel really naughty. And there was one time I'd gone out in the evening and I came back and I hadn't done them that day. And I saw this dip in the graph and it made me feel really guilty. So it gives you this sense of encouragement to actually get on and do them as well. So you feel like you're supported.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's wonderful, Beverly. Now, should we move on to, just to make sure that we cover that we clearly cover some points on the experience after surgery as well in terms of recovery. I think there's a lot of overlap in terms of, you know, feeling a bit isolated and trying to look around to find out what to do and tracking exercises. But could you tell us a bit about what your experience was like after surgery?
So the worst bit, I mean, before surgery, I went to the joint school, which was laid on by the hospital that I was with and where I had my surgery. And I arrived there and there was a room full of old people. They were all chatting amongst themselves about what they'd had done and before, and knee replacements, all sorts of things. And do you know what? Nobody said a word to me. Nobody even spoke to me. And I think they actually thought that I was probably one of the medical staff coming to either, you know, watch it or join in or keep an eye on them. So yeah, that was my first thing. And I hadn't taken anyone with me because they had said I could, but I thought, well, I can walk in. I don't need anyone. And then all of a sudden, they didn't mean to disclude me, but all the elderly people were sitting there chatting amongst themselves, and then they talked about your recovery. They talked about how you probably live in a bungalow, how you probably already got stair rails, and how you probably have got small dogs. Well, I've actually got really big dogs.
I was going to say, you've got police dogs.
So yeah, and how you probably already got a walk-in shower. And I was like, wow, I'm never ever going to cope after surgery. This is I actually walked out and cried and rang my husband and said, this is game over. You know, I'm not going to be able to do all these things, and all these people have got everything. Their life's already set up for this. How am I going to cope with young children, a shower and a bath? What am I going to do? And so I went into hospital, and whereas everyone's rushing to come out, I didn't want to come out. You know, I was going to quite happily stay there and be fed and looked after and not have to deal with my children and things. So I actually ended up nearly convincing them I could stay an extra day, even though there was actually nothing wrong with me, because I felt so worried and nervous about coming out. And as we've talked about it before, I thought everybody's different.
Yeah.
And, you know, different people are going to need different aids when they come out. However, you know, being younger, I had good balance in the first place. So I was really, I tried they get you up within the first 24 hours, less than 24 hours after your operation. And they gave me a Zimmer, but actually I was too fast for it and nearly fell over with it. So I went straight to 2 sticks. And before the end of that day, they had me going upstairs. So I had my 2 sticks. I did get a really good purchase off. In fact, I got it off a Free Cycle advert, and it was one of these. There is a name for it. I've forgotten it at the moment. These like an armchair. I call them. They have a lot of them in homes and things like that. But I put a nice big throw over it. I'm trying to think of there's a particular name of them, and I've forgotten it at the moment.
Well,
high back chair.
High back chair. Okay.
Like a high back chair. And that was the only thing I got, and I love it. In fact, everyone kept getting in it. All the kids liked it as well. And that was the best thing to sit on because my sofa was really low.
Okay.
That was the only extra thing that I got that I felt that I needed. I didn't have a raised toilet seat. In the hospital, they put you straight onto my hospital put you straight onto a normal toilet.
Right, okay.
They said that you couldn't pick things up off the floor because of the restrictions. However, there's something called the golfers. I think it's the golfers swing or golfers pose.
Yeah.
And you can actually putting your good leg out, putting your leg out the back and leaning down. So actually, I found ways to adapt and ways to get into the shower and do all these things. So actually, I didn't really have all these gadgets and gizmos that I was worried about having. But as I said, that was because I had the strength and the ability to stand already. So some people are going to need more than others. You know, if you can get them the aids, they're great to have.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't knock them, but I wouldn't also worry that there's people out there thinking they've got to purchase everything and this is going to be really expensive for the time for them. You know, it's not. You can get around things. You can makeshift things.
Yeah, and it's also often possible to borrow from various local charities and for free and things like that. The Red Cross, I know, can donate both, you know, various various gadgets and tools that can be helpful if you're recovering from a knee and hip replacement, in terms of identifying what any extra needs might be at home. And of course, it'll depend on what your condition is before surgery, and stairs and how steep the stairs are, and there's a number of things that I guess each clinical team will be able to advise more specifically, and occupational therapists in particular can be really helpful with that.
And if you've got kids that are old enough, use them. I used to get, that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
You know, I used to get my son used to come in every morning and put my socks on for me. So before he went to school, that was his one job before he went to school. Just come in and put your socks on. I can get myself the rest of me dressed. It's fine.
Yeah. and I guess if there aren't any children around, then you know, so spouses and significant others can work well too, right?
Yeah. They're not too bad.
Fantastic. What I think we should do, we'll add in the description beneath this video, we will add links to an example of this, the golfers. I know exactly the one you mean, but I can't remember exactly what they call it. Sort of the golfer's pickup or something. And what I can do is I'll ask Helen, our physiotherapist, on tomorrow's session, perhaps to give an example of that.
Yeah.
And perhaps also a link to an example of one of these high back chairs that you found helpful.
Yeah, and the other, I mean, you know, there's loads of people getting rid of those. You know, you can. They're really expensive. You go and buy one from Next, but if you can, you know, you look in the Free Cycle or the on eBay, that you can get one much cheaper, and then you can, you know, get rid of it if you want to afterwards. But just get a cheap throw and put over it, and it does the job.
I guess that's the benefit. They might not always be the coolest of gadgets, which means that once you don't need them anymore, perhaps they may well be available through something like Free Cycle or Gumtree and so on.
Yeah.
Excellent. Super. Well, I think we've covered quite a lot of good bases in terms of, you know, sharing and sort of you sharing or digging into your wealth of experience of what it's like to be getting ready for a hip replacement and what it's like to be recovering from a hip replacement. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, or anything that you wish you knew sort of in those first few weeks after surgery, or even in sort of in the
you know, I do keep up. You know, I wasn't a complete superwoman. Do keep up with the meds that they do give you.
Being modest now.
You know, everyone keeps saying, what were you doing? And I don't advise that you do everything that I did. I was back at work within 6 weeks.
Wow.
So that was really good. People ask about driving. Yes, I drove at 4 weeks. There isn't a rule, but you do check that the biggest thing is if you have an accident, you've got to be, you know, you're responsible, and you've got to be able to justify what you're doing. So I would go with your doctor's recommendations. And definitely seek your doctor's advice, because they'll be able to tell you, and we're all different. Just because you're taking a bit longer doesn't mean your operation's not worked or it's not working. I can't emphasize enough, you know, don't compare yourself to other people, but also on the same account, with the right mindset, things and the right recovery, you could recover quite quickly. So 6 weeks I was back at work, and 7 weeks I was back on my horse.
Wow, that's very impressive. But again, it's very important to highlight that there's a real value in hearing about other people's experiences and stories. But again, you shouldn't compare yourself closely to someone else, and it may well be, I mean, not every. And
I did. I felt I made a mistake. In the first week, I pushed myself a little bit too much, and because I used it. I went out quite a lot, and was going out for lunch and things like that. And I did faint in the first week because my blood pressure got a bit high. So probably had overdone it a little bit. So that wasn't ideal. But on the same account, it did show that actually the hips are a lot stronger than we think, and the new one was. And it did take the fall, but I certainly don't recommend that. Take it easy and don't push yourself too much.
I think that sounds like very, very sound advice from you, Beverly. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
And I'm sure this conversation may well spoke other questions from people. Feel free to comment in the video below, or indeed, what we'll also do is add a link to the Facebook group that we've mentioned. And of course, people can then join that group and engage in the conversations there. And of course, there's also the Joint School app, and we've highlighted the value that something like an app can have as a sort of point of reference and a motivator to keep up with the exercises. And on tomorrow's session with Helen, again, we'll be going through some exercises, and I'll make sure to ask Helen to demonstrate this golfer's pickup as well.
And there's a way of getting into the stepping very carefully into the shower as well. So you just bend at the knee, and so you put your good leg in first, and then just bend your operated leg just at the knee, raising your ankle to your bum.
Oh, you mean particularly if you have a shower in a bathtub and there's
if you have just to get in and out of there quite safely, but always make sure you've got some support to lean on, or you've got someone holding you as you do it to get in. So that's the other sort of little trick that I think is worth knowing.
Let's have a think about how we can. Let's see if I can find a good example of that.
I think there is a good picture I've seen that I showed, or I sent to somebody that was asking about it. I think there's a good picture describing it online. But I'm more than happy, if anyone ever wants to ask me any questions, I'm more than happy to answer any personal questions or any questions that anyone might not be, want to ask. And if I can, we're more than happy to help people.
Oh, that's very kind, Beverly. Thank you so much. Now, before we sign off, are the dogs there available for? Can we have a quick look at the dogs?
There's one in a basket. This is my puppy. Is he there? Rocky.
Look at that.
Rocky. Oh, hold on. Where are you? Here. There he is.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Beverly.
You're welcome. Lovely to talk to you again, Axel.
Yeah, you too. Take care now. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.